So what I'm going to be talking about is tax knowledge. And like it or hate it, when you run a business, the tax system is part of your responsibility in doing that. And this research is important because it highlights which parts of small businesses particularly struggle with their tax knowledge. And that's important because if you're struggling with complying with the tax system, potentially you have penalties, interest, and a good business can become non-viable. And so if we can identify those businesses that have low tax knowledge, then we can think of strategies to try to help those businesses. And as Melissa's pointed out, that tax knowledge is also related to good performing businesses in terms of they have higher gross profit and net profit as well. Now, a problem with running a small business is that you've got to be a master of many things. And you think, how many taxes do I really need to know about? One of the things Melissa looked at when in the interviews with experts was, a small business owner doesn't need to know everything about the tax system. They need to have a general awareness about payment dates, tax reporting, how to actually determine their tax liability, to determine whether they're required to be GST registered. If they are, can they claim input tax credits and their taxable supplies? What is an allowable deduction for their business? How can they calculate depreciation and forecast those liabilities, as well as to be able to provision for tax liability in their bank accounts? And additionally, to be able to identify which benefits are potentially subject to FBT. So those are just the core requirements that a small business owner needs to know about. When we looked at the tax knowledge scores, the highest tax knowledge was in relation to GST. And that could be relating to the sense that GST is something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Income tax was the second highest. FBT, surprisingly, was the third highest. Superannuation guarantee and PAYG withholding was in the bottom two there. What was particularly of concern was that about 54% of small business owners had knowledge scores of poor and low. And so over a majority of small business owners have a low or poor understanding of the tax system. About 30% were medium and high. When we looked at the different demographics about who was more likely to have lower tax knowledge, recent immigrants had the lowest tax knowledge, which is not surprising. But that is particularly of concern because a lot of recent immigrants, as we heard this morning, will actually commence their own business. And so if they have low tax knowledge, potentially they'll get into a lot of trouble inadvertently. Additionally, what was found was that sole traders, people who operated their business in their own name, had the lowest tax knowledge. So again, that potentially identifies a demographic that we need to focus on, those contractors who are operating in their own names. Generally, people who operated through a company and a trust, a combined structure, they had the highest tax knowledge, which probably is representative of them actually using a more sophisticated structure for their business. Also, business age was found to be important. Businesses with less than 2 years of operation had the lowest tax knowledge. And for many in practice and industry, that's actually quite obvious. We've all seen businesses in those first couple of years really flounder in terms of their tax compliance, which then can lead to a whole lot of hurt. Those businesses operating for greater than 10 years had the highest tax knowledge. Additionally, those businesses that were employing people had the highest tax knowledge, where if you were a non-employing business, you had the lowest tax knowledge. So again, that identifies that if a business is going to transfer from not employing someone to employing someone, that transition needs support in terms of their tax knowledge. And additionally, if you've got past business experience, you're more likely to have higher tax knowledge. So again, that indicates that those businesses with lower tax knowledge have potential issues or someone we need to be concerned about. So that's good identifying problem areas, but what are the solutions? Okay, so the prior thing was talking about education. But one of the issues that we have is business owners are time poor. So how you've got to specialise in your own business in terms of whether it's manufacturing, the steel manufacturing, we had Gabriel talking about that, or running a restaurant. In addition to that, you need to get some basic understanding of the tax system that your business is operating in. Particularly, we need to focus on sole traders, recent immigrants in the first 5 to 10 years of commencement, and those businesses with no employees. One of the things that we need to do in terms of motivation, and this is where the other part of the research is important, is cash flow. As soon as you talk about cash flow to small businesses, all of a sudden their ears prick up. Guess what? Tax affects your cash flow. And if you don't provision for that, and so one of the things that we've learnt over the last 2 years running the tax clinic, one of the things we do is educational workshops. And a lot of those workshops have been to small and micro businesses. First couple of workshops we did, we just talked about tax. Guess what? Everyone turned off. We realised we've actually got to talk about tax and their cash flow, talking about how when they're implementing a straight to have a sale, well, there's going to be tax on that. Could be GST, there could be income tax. So that needs to be provisioned for. Same thing about employing someone. Yes, you've got a provision for the wages, but also the super guarantee. And so by intermingling how your cash flow and tax interrelates is so important. And this is one of the things that the ATO should be given credit for. They've been working on a tax flow kit for the last 5 to 6 years, trying to actually provide free resources in terms of advisors. Because one of the things that research has demonstrated too, that sometimes advisors themselves are struggling to give good advice to their business operators as well. And so being able to upskill them. Additionally, people in high school need to have tax education, particularly, people doing apprenticeship. While you're an apprentice, you're an employee, but a lot of times once you finish your apprenticeship, you'll be running your own business. To what extent are they knowledgeable about those consequences? Additionally, and this is a real trigger point and sticking point, is about getting an ABN is super easy in Australia. And in a way, the government wants to facilitate that, which in some aspects is great. But having an ABN has responsibilities. And so how can we facilitate and encourage those businesses who have recently got an ABN to actually increase their knowledge, both in terms of tax and also computerised accounting software is another important thing. And so some of the strategies that we think may assist is, is it possible to have a tax rebate? So if you're a small business, when you lodge your first tax return, if you've done a number of educational programs, you're entitled to a tax rebate as part of your tax return. Because essentially, if you get a rebate, that's dollar for dollar for the government, but that is actually an investment for the government in your business because it turns in you getting an education to run a successful business. A lot of the government incentives currently, particularly with the CGT concessions, are about all end of life. So there's heaps of tax concession when you sell your business. That's not particularly, while that's generous, it's not particularly useful at that beginning stage. So in terms of government policy, maybe they need to rethink about when we provide tax concessions to small businesses and should they be front-loaded more. And that was some of the recommendations that stemmed from the Board of Tax in its recent Small Business Review last year. Additionally, one of the unfortunate things is a lot of small businesses' first interaction with the ATO is when they've done something wrong. That's an unfortunate thing in terms of compliance because if your first interaction is a negative one, research demonstrates then sometimes you will have a negative attitude towards that. And so one of the things that could be is that the Commissioner of Tax, if you've done educational courses in terms of tax, in terms of cash flow, that could be taken into account to impose lower penalties on you. And again, that potentially could incentivise small business owners to do programs in this regard. Additionally, about 2 years ago, the Commissioner of Tax was given powers in terms of super guarantee to give directions for education. So if you're a small business operator and you've stuffed up your super guarantee, rather than impose penalties, the Commissioner of Tax can give directions for education. Why doesn't that apply to other parts of the tax system? Again, that gives it's trying to direct behaviour to what you want in terms of compliance, which helps the small business be successful, but also provides a better attitude towards tax compliance. Additionally, one of the things that employment seems to be related. Currently, if you employ someone, it costs your small business more money, both in terms of compliance, in terms of time, in terms of dealing with the award, dealing with the tax obligations on that. Can we turn that around so when you employ someone, there's actually some tax benefit to that? So again, maybe get rid or minimise some of those concessions at the end of life. With the company tax rate, currently that's available to all companies, provided they've only got less than 20% passive income. should it be only available to companies that are actually employing someone? So you're actually linking the lower corporate tax rate to businesses that are employing, because businesses that employ are more likely to expand and grow the economy. Currently, we provide concessions too loosely without actually being pinpointed to what we're trying to encourage. Additionally, there's a small business rebate for sole traders and partnerships. Again, should that be linked to employment and actually increase it? Currently, it maxes out at $1,000. Should that be actually increased to $5,000 and say, look, you're entitled to the small business rebate if you're an employing small business, whether you're a sole trader or general partnership? And also, again, this can be paid for by actually reducing some of the CGT concessions that are at end of life, rather than actually looking at the ongoing process of the small business. And I think one of the things I would love to hear from you is how can we motivate small businesses to care about the tax system, to care about their computer accounting software knowledge, because if they care about that, that will help their business and that will help the economy. And if the economy is doing well, guess what? We raise more tax revenue, which is great. So thank you.